Every game needs a hook. At least one thing it excels at to push it past the competition. For Need for Speed Heat, that might just be its superb lighting, at least for one half of the game. Boosting down the streets of Palm City, a thinly veiled caricature of Florida, the nighttime races are mesmerizing to look at. Seriously, it's a spectacle. You can tally up all the individual parts that make up a whole. We have lens flares, dynamic headlamp shadows, and even volumetric lighting on helicopter searchlights, giving it this lush 80s visual signature. Even on console, where the Need for Speed series is, yes, sadly, still locked to 30 FPS, it's one of the best looking Frostbite engine games. First impressions are great then, but the other foot has to land. This is the game's opener, almost a vertical slice developer Ghost gives to show its best side. It's all baby blues and pinks, emerging to the neon streets of the inner city. The road bursts with reflected colour, and it comes together in just the right way. And yet, it's a shame Heat doesn't hold this level of quality for too long. Play to the second mission, where the light of day reveals all, and the visual package starts to fall apart. Honestly, I'm rarely so torn in a review of a game. Visually speaking, these are the two sides of NFS Heat that you'll be up against, a literal night and day difference. So let's break down what it gets right and wrong.
Oh hey, I'll be with you in a sec. Come on in.
First up, I will admit Need for Speed Heat really came out of nowhere for me this year. 2 years on since Payback, the lack of buzz surrounding this follow-up had me fearing the worst, but the quality, thankfully, is here. The story, as ever, hangs on the world of street racing, the thrill of the tune-up, and a chasing police force. All beats of the story are told in a mixture of pre-rendered and in-engine cutscenes, to account for the fact you can design your own character. It gives a backbone to the gameplay at least, but it's not essential for enjoying the game. Progression is slow to start, I will admit, but satisfying once you get money. You buy cars from that point, enter events dotted around the map, and spend winnings on even better cars, or better still, on modifications to enhance stats for acceleration or max speed. It's a strong RPG style loop. The fact it gives you so many options though is what makes it so compelling. Technically speaking, it also inherits a lot of the best bits from other recent Frostbite games. Battlefield 5 and FIFA 20 already boast some gorgeous high dynamic range support, for example, and this year, that makes the jump to Need for Speed on console. So all of those gorgeous neon lights, the headlamps, and the way light flashes through the rain, it shines on a compatible HDR set. The volumetric lighting itself is also hugely impressive. Again, it comes out much better at night, purely because there's so much more contrast. But it sticks out especially in the night air. It creates this dense look to the space under street lamps, and I love the look of it. Shadows are also standout here. Drive slow, look close, and you'll see each headlight actually projects an individual beam across the road. Objects get a massive silhouette if you drive close, for example, and in a race, oncoming cars whip by within a half second, casting two long shadows across the street side. It's a very nice touch, something that appears to work on every console, from base Xbox One upwards. The downside to this is that, yes, half the races are in daytime. You do at least get a stylish kind of transition between night and day states from the map menu. It's a shame though there's no seamless 24-hour cycle here, but the transition is really nicely handled. What you're left with though is a less visually arresting look for a big chunk of the game. Weather changes, but removing the glossy lighting effects at night shows how empty the world really is at points. Now, physics do spice things up. Traffic cones fly and stone walls crumble on impact. In fact, just about everything you can see can be toppled during a race, but NFS Heat still loses a lot of its appeal in the light of day. A big part of the letdown is the visual settings. Screen space reflections are the main issue here. Okay, they look amazing at night, but during the day, well, you can see how approximated they truly are. Check out the water here. The SSR is mapped very imprecisely around foreground objects. Notice those big gaps between the object and the point at which the reflection really starts to render. At a distance, there's barely any sign of the actual reflection working, more blank space than anything else. Screen space reflections have always been a less GPU taxing option, a stepping stone to what we really want with ray tracing, but the quality of this implementation is obviously quite poor. This goes for every console, even on Xbox One X here. I'd argue it's bad enough that the water would look better without SSR, and instead just relied on cube mapping. Speaking of which, cube mapping is used already for shop windows or the garage. The results there are low resolution though, and again, it sticks out like a sore thumb if you slow down. Likewise, a form of temporal anti-aliasing is applied on console, which often leaves banding artifacts on sharp turns that can distract. All round, it comes back to the fact a lot of these flaws are hidden in the speed of a race, and especially at night. Drop to second gear and play in daytime and it starts to come out. Image quality is a big point here too, though this does vary by console. So to start with the best cases, we have Xbox One X here, targeting 3840 by 2160. It actually looks pin sharp most of the time, especially stood still. However, it appears to use a dynamic resolution system to get there. For example, a test of this starting grid comes in at 1944 pixels high, or 90% on the vertical axis of the target 2160 pixels. So there is a range, but it doesn't flex all too much overall, even with so many cars on show, so not bad. The curious part? Well, on top of this, the game appears to show checkerboard rendering too. Take this in motion shot, beneath the motion blur you'll catch a telltale checker pattern to vertical lines. That full screen blur on X hides it so well you'll be hard pressed to notice, to be fair, but yes, it's a factor on image quality. And if it is CBR, that would in theory make the native resolution 1920 by 2160 in the best case on X, with drops under that on the vertical axis when under strain. Likewise for PS4 Pro, we have checkerboard artifacts all over the place. 4K is again the target resolution, but in PS4 Pro's case, there's a more aggressive dynamic res. In the same starting grid shot, that puts it down to 1728 pixels high, or 80% on that axis. As for the base consoles, this is where the problems creep in a bit. Checkerboard artifacts show on both PS4 and Xbox One. But the fact is the motion blur isn't as high quality, not as pristine as the enhanced models. So the net result is, well, it just shows up more, even to the naked eye while racing. There's a grainier texture to the image as a result, again especially during daytime races. As far as native resolutions go, base Xbox One targets 1920 by 1080, though the pixel count drops to 972p in this starting grid. Base PS4 on the other hand targets 1920 by 1080 as well, the good news there being I haven't caught any major drops under 1080p. Visual differences also divide the consoles outside of resolution. Easily the best way to show this off is using the two extremes in GPU power, base Xbox One versus X on right. So to cover a few, pop-in is notably more obvious on the base model, and the same goes for base PS4. The X and Pro enjoy better LODs for plant life, while buildings and trees draw in at the same range, generally across all formats. Perhaps it's for the best given this is an online game, and so no one player is going to be hamstrung by more or less geometry pop-in. Otherwise, well, motion blur is superior on X shown here, and by extension Pro uses a similar setting. A minor discrepancy otherwise is that shadows are clearer on the enhanced machines too, though you'll only really notice while idle. Likewise, the only difference between Pro and X is a slight variance in ambient occlusion quality, but again that won't notice at all during regular gameplay. Perhaps the only glaring drawback on any machine is that base Xbox One, in my experience anyway, had issues with playing pre-rendered scenes smoothly. Notice there's a lot of hitching during this one, likely a byproduct of loading the game world in the background.
You want to send a message? You need a messenger.
A very quick word on performance here. It's quick because frankly, there's a very conservative approach to targeting 30 FPS here. I suppose the best way to demonstrate it is to show you what you'd presume is the worst case. Base Xbox One really doesn't have much of an issue in gameplay. It's a firm 30 FPS cap, as with other games in the series. You'll see some small blips on each console, which is a shame, but looking to PS4, Pro or X, I couldn't bring the frame rate down under any circumstances. It's 30 all the way. The fix on 30 FPS, it must be said, is quite sobering in the presence of such a fast racing game. It's hard to expect too much more on base machines at this stage, but I'd love to see how viable it would have been on X or Pro, for example, with an optional mode. Bear in mind, similar open world racing games like Forza Horizon 4 already achieve it on X, at the cost of dropping the resolution to 1080p. The engine tech beneath each is wildly different, of course. Even so, Frostbite is geared towards 60 FPS games in FIFA and Battlefield, albeit with frame rate drops there. A game as rapid as this is aching for similar treatment. Perhaps 60 FPS then is something we'll see in the next generation of Need for Speed games. For now though, we are at least seeing the boat being pushed out technically, by taking established features from other games using the engine. Need for Speed Heat is by no means a perfect package, but there's still plenty to like. The progression system gets its hooks into you with time, and while the handling isn't quite as tight as I'd like, it's plenty enjoyable. The real star though is the combination of vivid art direction and a technology pushing better lighting with proper HDR support. Supposing you're looking for more demo material from a racing game on your HDR set, it's definitely one to add to the list. But that's all I have for today. If you did enjoy this analysis, please feel free to like or subscribe, and why not hit the bell as well to get notifications as any new video lands. To get a pristine, high quality version of this video, check out our Patreon at digitalfoundry.net, and to get in touch with me or the team, just use Twitter. But from me for now, thanks for watching.
I think we won!
Yes!